Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Veronica Escobar of Texas. Her district includes the Walmart in El Paso. Today's mass shooting took place. Congressman Escobar, we feel honored that you took time to be with us tonight. Our condolences, of course, to you and to your community. Thank you for making the time to be here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on, Rachel.
We have been talking about a number of different aspects of what happened in your community. We have been talking about the very difficult question about whether or not white nationalism has implicit support on the ragged edge of mainstream American politics. We have been talking about the president's responsibility in his own rhetoric and how it dovetails with some of what we have seen from the shooter. We have been talking about gun policy and the prospects or lack thereof for gun reform. But we have also been talking about the fact that this is the worst terrorist attack and the most murderous terrorist attack targeting Latinos in the modern history of our country. And this is something, I know El Paso is an 80%, 85% Latino city. Your district, heavily Latino, a lot of cross-border traffic, and proudly so. Can you just tell us about how the racial impact and the demographic impact here is resonating in your community and what you think the effect will be in the long run?
Rachel, this is an extraordinary community, one that has an abundance of love. As you mentioned, we celebrate our location on the U.S.-Mexico border. We love the binational nature of our region. And so, you know, it is especially painful. All gun violence is painful, but it is especially painful that this seemed to be an intersection between the epidemic of gun violence and the epidemic of hate that exists in our country. You know, there's behind me, there's this incredibly beautiful makeshift memorial full of flowers, rosaries, crosses, photos. The size of the crowd has only grown. I first arrived to go and be with our families, and they are still so full of pain, but they're not full of hate. They're full of pain, but they're not full of hate. The president has used the words in the clips that you've shown that have caused a tremendous amount of pain and that have fueled violence. Those words are still hanging out there. He needs to recognize his role. He needs to recognize that those words have power. He needs to apologize, and he needs to take them back. You know, we were told by law enforcement earlier that we have to be concerned about copycat acts of violence. It would go a long way for the president to say, I used racist language, I used words that dehumanized people, and I was wrong, and I take them back. Only after he does that should he be welcomed into our community.
The president is, we understand, going to visit your community. The mayor of El Paso has announced that the president is due to visit the day after tomorrow. In those remarks you just made, and I know speaking earlier today, you suggested that the president at this point is not welcome in your district because of those past remarks that he's made that you've described as being so painful. What is your reaction tonight to the news that he is planning on coming to El Paso and so soon?
You know, and I'll tell you, Rachel, I only speak for myself. I know that there are people in the community who want him to come here. They want him, they want to welcome him, and they have every right to feeling that way and to wanting to see him come into this community. But the words that I mentioned that are hanging over us have power, and they clearly and obviously have fueled the violence. They have fueled it. The screed, as you all described, was a litany of what the president has said at his rallies. You know, as I was walking earlier among the families that gathered at the memorial and was talking with them, embracing them, trying to give them as best comfort as I could, there were several women especially who came up to me and clung to me and were weeping, and they said, don't let him come here. There is so much resilience and beauty in this community, but we've got to deal with our pain. And there are people who are still afraid. And as much as I want to tell them, don't be afraid, and we are still a safe community, we are, and we always will be, and we're going to take good care of one another. We need the president to accept responsibility, apologize, and take back those words so that his followers, the people who cling to his every word, who follow his rallies, who get riled up and excited about the bigotry that comes from his speeches at those rallies, they need to hear that the president acknowledges that he was wrong and that his words were wrong and that every human being has value, because those words have dehumanized whole groups of people. You can't be a person with a gun and shoot innocent victims unless you think they are subhuman. That language dehumanizes people.
Congresswoman Veronica Escobar of El Paso, whose district, of course, includes the site of Saturday's shooting. I know that you have been called upon in a million different ways since this has befallen your community in the past few days. Thank you for helping us understand what you're going through, and please keep us posted over these next couple of days. I know the president's visit is going to be an emotional thing.
Can I just say, such a weird thing, though, to be at a place in our country where after a national tragedy, the president isn't welcome. And we heard, it's not the first time we've heard it about this president. The Pittsburgh synagogue community had a debate that roiled not just Pittsburgh, but the synagogue community itself. And to hear that, and you think about, I worked for a president who was plenty polarizing, but even after Katrina, where his actual response to Katrina was widely criticized, he was always welcome. We went to New Orleans. I went a half a dozen times with him. President Obama. I mean, just it is such. You just have to stop sometimes in these jobs and point out when it is not normal.
Yeah, and Congresswoman Escobar, I think, being even-handed there, saying, "Listen, on this question, I speak for myself, and I can talk to you about some of my constituents who feel the same way. I recognize there are other people in my district who will be pleased to have the president here and who want that." We heard from Clint Watts, former FBI special agent, here earlier in our hour, who said that the president should have gone to El Paso immediately, and that would have done some good. Clearly, there are meaningful differences of opinion here, but to see the emotion with which the Congresswoman was conveying that, not only from herself and from her constituents, that they see him as the cause of so much of this pain, that is a profound thing when you think about national leadership and how it works.
It's a huge deal.